Hello and welcome back to Mental Health Matters. My name is Andrew Ditzel and this is episode 27. In today's episode, we are going to be talking about burnout. Burnout is something that is very prevalent in the mental health world, something that I have struggled with personally. And I'm going to share today some things and ways, coping mechanisms on how I have managed burnout more recently in my life since I've become aware of it and am still learning to manage that. So I'm excited for today's episode. We will be right back after this. All right, so today we are talking burnout, a topic that is very important to me. And like I said in the intro, something that I have personally struggled with, and I see others struggle with it as well. So I was thinking about making this episode to portray the message to other people that it's okay. And as always, you are not alone with what you are going through. Today we are talking about burnout, but before we get started, as you can see, there is no guest on the podcast today. We're taking a little break from having guests on, but I want to take this chance and opportunity to thank the past 6 guests that came on to the podcast, sharing their personal experience and what they have been through. With them coming on, it's a testament to what we talk about all the time here on this podcast, and that's everyone has something that they're going through. Everyone struggles with something, and we're here to overcome it and get through the challenges that are presented in our lives. So I just want to take a second to going all the way back to 6 weeks ago with Gabriella Brockfeld coming on, and then Aaliyah Patron, Johnny Castagnazzi, Anthony Pecorella, Melanie Hinger, and Rich Spatola. All 6 of them came on and shared their story, and they all have completely different stories, which is great. And with Rich coming on last week, we talked a lot about it becomes a human experience that everybody goes through something, and mental health really is a universal topic, a topic that everybody has. And what I mean by that is everyone has a mental health. And it took me a long time to believe that I didn't even have a mental health, that I'm just going to do whatever I want and whatever I felt like all the time. But our actions, our decisions, our thoughts, our feelings, those are all encapsulated in our mental health, an extremely important thing to be aware of in this life. I want to emphasize the word believe, because I think before a couple years ago, I would say probably 5 or 6 years ago, I really didn't even believe in mental health. And I think that's a very common ideology or belief, that people don't believe that mental health even exists. And I was one of those people, so I'm not shaming anybody or judging anybody for thinking that way, but my whole push is to spread awareness about mental health and that it is a real thing. And even if maybe you're somebody who doesn't struggle personally with your own mental health, that you still have a mental health as well, that maybe it's easier for you to manage, but everybody has a mental health. And like I talked about, we did the trilogy where mental health is defined as social, emotional, and psychological well-being. And all of us have that. We talked about social being communicating with other people. How do you charge your battery? I think many people can relate with emotions and their connections with other people, and then psychological health as well, being part of mental health, and how your brain works and how it functions. And we all tick a different way, which is really, I think, great, because it's nice to learn and know things about other people and what they go through. And I think that's the beauty in having these guests on in the past 6 weeks, that I really got to sit down and be present with people, and they vulnerably were able to open up and share what they have experienced in their lives. And mental health is not just one thing. We go all the way from Gabriella talking about postpartum to Aaliyah and Anthony talking about their experiences with cancer. And then we have Johnny talking about sports. Same thing with Mel talking about sports and managing mental health in sports. Melanie also had loss. And then Rich gets deeper into anxiety and depression and how that showed up for him. And I think it's just beautiful because everybody really has a different experience. And everybody goes through different experiences in our lives, and our mental health all shows up in different ways. But as always, we say, you are not alone. So I just wanted to take that moment to talk about how mental health really is such a universal thing that everyone has, and some people manage it different than others. But it's present in our world. And again, my goal is to spread awareness. And I want to thank again those 6 guests for the past 6 weeks for coming on and sharing their personal experience, because I think if you listened, you could definitely take something away from it. And I know just being part of the conversation, it helped me a lot in not feeling so alone with the mental health struggles that I have and things that I have been through. So, getting into what we are talking about today, I mentioned in the beginning, we are talking burnout. And burnout is something that I have struggled with and still struggle with, but am learning more about and how to go about the way I live my life in order to not burn myself out as much as I have in the past. And I think, like anything in life, it's a learning process and something that we all go through as we get older. You know, you learn different things about yourself, different ways that you can live or cope or manage the way you are. So I came up with 5 ideas today for talking about burnout. And the first idea I want to talk about today is protecting my peace, or protecting your peace, protecting peace in general and what that means. And I think with protecting peace, it's something that I'm really focusing and learning a lot about right now through therapy. And a word that comes to my mind, which is almost a little confrontational for me because I don't really like this word, but it helps me focus on the idea of protecting peace. And that word is boundary, and how important boundaries are in our lives with other people. And it might not even be other people, it might be things, or maybe substances, or maybe environments, but creating boundaries for yourself with those people, places, and things that protect your peace. Because I think when you're around those things that take your energy, don't fill you up, and leave you feeling a little bit empty after being around, again, the noun, person, place, or thing, whatever it is that might be draining you, could be causing you burnout. And I mean, just to use examples in my life, like changing my career, that was a big one. Um, Being in a different environment and protecting my peace from a profession that wasn't serving me and wasn't helping me out. And I was definitely feeling burnout at my job. And by creating a boundary and creating separation and space, really, in a healthy way, and protecting your peace, that can definitely help burnout. So that was just one example that I was thinking of to help with burnout. A second example that I wrote down here was balancing energy levels. On a prior episode, I talked about social battery and filling up that battery, what fills you up. And I actually talked about introversion versus extroversion and how we are charged. So today, in terms of balancing our energy levels and connecting that with burnout, I feel like when you balance the energy that you have, it's much easier to not feel burnt out. And I think everything that we're going to talk about today really connects and intertwines with itself. But understanding your energy level, and I think of an example just like when I sleep and I wake up and I can sense and feel the energy that I have for that day. And understanding that energy level is really important. What do I have in my tank today? What do I have? What can I offer maybe to other people, to myself, to a community, to my job, and the amount of energy that I can give. And I think knowing that and understanding that is extremely important in not burning yourself out. Because let's say you wake up at the beginning of the day and you feel, you know what, I think I only got like 20% today. And if you only have 20%, you really can only give 20%. You can't give 50% if you only have 20%. And that's an interesting way that I like to think about it. And giving the energy that I do have, as opposed to giving energy that I don't have. And I can almost, as I'm saying this, feel that feeling that I know when I give more energy than I even have in my tank. And that can definitely result in burnout. A third thing that I have written down here is self-awareness of how I feel. And that kind of connects with what we just talked about and what I mentioned with balancing your energy levels. But you can't balance your energy levels if you don't know your energy levels. So having the self-awareness of how you feel is extremely important and something that I'm still working on. And I talked a lot about this with Rich last episode in terms of being aware of how I feel. And it's taken me a lot of time and effort and energy to really understand and grow in touch with my emotions. Rich and I had mentioned that being a man, that sometimes we are meant to stuff our emotions down or not feel our emotions. But it's so important to be in touch with and to be aware of the emotions that we feel. And having the self-awareness to know how you feel is an extremely important step in making good decisions for ourselves and ultimately not burning ourselves out. Because if you really don't know how you feel, it's hard to gauge what you can do, what you can't do, if you don't know what you're feeling or what you're going through. And I think taking time and sitting back and getting in touch with my emotions, and it doesn't even have to be emotions, but how do I feel? Like, how am I really feeling? It could be energy levels. It could be sadness, happiness, anything that you're feeling, and really getting in touch with that, I think can help with managing, okay, how am I going to move forward from this point in order to not burn myself out or to involve myself in a situation. I keep on saying the word burnout because that's today's episode, but just to be in a situation that really benefits yourself. So I think that's big, having self-awareness of how we feel. And the last two here are two things that I learned directly in therapy. And the first one of those, well, our fourth thing that we're talking about here is saying no. And I learned in therapy that the most important word in the English language is the word no. And I think it's very difficult for someone like myself who is a recovering people pleaser. That's how I like to phrase myself. It's very hard for me to say no, and still is hard for me to say no from time to time. But how important it is to say no to certain situations that you're in, and sometimes it could be so difficult, and I feel it. And something that I just talked about recently was peer pressure and feeling like you have to do something or feeling the pressure. And I use that word peer pressure that almost sounds like a middle school phrase, but I see it with 50, 60, 70-year-old people that still go through peer pressure. Peer pressure is feeling like you have to say yes to something, feeling like you have to be involved in something for whatever that reason might be. And saying no is such a powerful and strong thing to do. When you're able to say no to something, and I'm not saying just say no just to say no, but being aware and saying no in situations where, you know what, I know that's not going to work for me. I know that's not going to serve me. I know it's not going to be good for me. And saying no to things like that is definitely beneficial for ourselves. And for me, I've noticed the more I've been able to say no the more I've been able to stay away from burning out. And it's been extremely helpful. So that was something that I wanted to share, and I thought was really the biggest point here in what we're talking about today in managing burnout and how can we avoid burnout and use our coping skills to not burn ourselves out so much. And our last thing that we are talking about here today, the fifth thing, is our stop skill. So in therapy, I learned saying no and the stop skill. And the stop skill is very important because it comes back to the idea of having mindfulness and being mindful in the decisions that we make. You might be able to be like, well, I've made a lot of stupid decisions in my life. Or, you know what? Why did I do that? I wasn't really thinking when I did that. When you reflect back on the things that you may have done or ways you may have acted or talked to somebody else. And you're like, you know what? That's not really me. That's not my character. That's not who I am. And the stop skill can help with that. And what the stop skill really is before you make a decision, just stop. Think about what you're doing. Think about what you're deciding about before you make that decision. Because I think it's very easy for someone like me who sometimes cannot be super mindful with the decisions that I make, and be a little bit impulsive, but to think about what I'm doing, to stop, pause, and then make that decision. Because I thought about it. I did an episode on decisions, and I talked about the idea of having a wise mind. And using the stop skill, you're able to stop. And it sounds so silly. It's almost like, yeah, obviously think about what you're going to do. But to really be mindful, stop and use your wise mind to think about the decision or action or behavior or whatever it might be that you're about to make. It's extremely important. And for me, it's helped with burnout a lot because committing to things or overcommitting or really spreading myself very thin, it all comes from my decisions of I am going to commit to that. But if you're able to stop, take a step back and say, all right, let's think about this before we actually do commit. It really helps with maintaining the idea that you don't have to burn out. You don't have to involve yourself in everything all the time, but involving yourself in the things that you think about with your wise mind. You think about and say, all right, this is going to be good for me. This is what I want to be around. This is going to serve me. This is going to benefit me. And that's helped me a lot in terms of managing burnout in my life recently. So I thought these were 5 really good things to talk about today that I think anybody can relate with. The first being protecting your peace. The second, balancing your energy levels. The third is having self-awareness of how we feel. The fourth is saying no, for my people pleasers out there. And the fifth is the stop skill. Help you to be mindful and be present and make good decisions. So I thought that was good and something that many people could potentially relate with. So I'm happy I can share that today in today's episode, and something that I thought was really important that I could give a whole episode to. So as always, I want to close the episode with a Bible verse. I have been getting very close with my faith, and something that is a constant ongoing process. And with the start of Lent here, I think it really shows for me in my own faith how much I have to grow, and even how close I feel sometimes, how much more I really can become closer to my faith. And it's something that if you're involved with your faith, it's something that everybody goes through. No matter how deep or how close you feel, there's always infinite more to grow in your faith. And Lent is a great time to do that. So the Bible verse for today, connecting with the idea of burnout, is Matthew 11:28. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. So the way I like to think about this, and something that I'm really focusing on during the Lent season, is spending more time in prayer and spending more time, and maybe just from a mental health point of view, I wanted to add this in as well. Instead of prayer, maybe you practice meditation. but both very similar practices. And in this Bible verse, come to me, all you who are weary and burdened. And my time for prayer is really my time of coming to God and spending time with Him in prayer with my mind to get myself to a more peaceful state. And it is not easy because, with my own personal experience, I definitely have a very active mind, a mind that's challenging to turn off from time to time. But I think with prayer, it has been extremely beneficial. And that is my version of meditating and coming to a peaceful mind in such a busy world that we live in, with so many things that we have going on, so many worldly distractions that take us away from just being in the present moment. And I think that prayer really connects with the idea of burnout. And it helps us to be present, be mindful, be in the moment, and realize that we don't have to be on fire all the time and running around like a headless chicken, like I like to say. But we can be present. We can be present in our prayer. And for me, it's coming to God when I am weary and burdened. And that happens quite frequently, but I'm learning to manage it. And I think sharing this can hopefully help others manage their burnout as well. So, guys, thank you so much for tuning in today to episode 27 of Talking Burnout. I have some guests lined up moving forward where we're going to talk about some good stuff in the mental health world, what people are going through, and I'm really excited about that. So, thanks again for tuning in. Remember, your mental health matters and you are not alone. We'll see you next time.